The storm growled, rolling over the barren expanse of a small desert town in Southern California. In the Duggal house, glass trinkets on a rickety shelf quivered, teetering as if tempted by gravity's call. Shaun, an 18-year-old boy with dark hair and smudged glasses, lunged forward, his hands clamping down on a ceramic mermaid. The room's dim light caught the gleam of its vacant, painted eyes. Behind him, the old recliner creaked, its occupant stirring. Shaun's grandfather, his face a maze of deep-set lines, tilted his head back to squint at the water-stained ceiling. His voice emerged, low and rasping, like wind through dead leaves. "Rain," he muttered. Shaun released the mermaid and wiped his glasses on the sleeve of his worn hoodie. "Yeah," he murmured, glancing at the sullen sky outside. "Guess we needed it." His grandfather's eyes, glassy and far away, stayed fixed on the ceiling. "Rained half the year in Cork," he muttered. Shaun didn't answer. He knew where this was heading, a lecture about Ireland, its beauty, its gloom, its ghosts. He didn't care to hear it again. Instead, he sank onto the faded orange sofa and shuffled through his college registration papers on the coffee table. The decision loomed: single dorm or roommate? Years of solitude had shaped him, but maybe it was time for a change. The recliner groaned. Shaun glanced up just as his grandfather rose, his steps slow and deliberate, like a man wading through memories. He shuffled to the window, parting the blinds with a trembling hand. The rain whispered against the glass, filling the room with its melancholy rhythm. "It's been too long," the old man said, almost to himself. "It's time." Shaun paused, pencil in hand. "Time for what?" His grandfather turned, eyes shadowed, lips pressed thin. "Time to go out." The words hung in the air, heavy and strange. Shaun stood quickly. "Grandpa, you can't, it's pouring." "Mom's gonna be back any minute. She's making dinner mashed potatoes, remember?" The old man's face twisted with sudden irritation. "I don't give a damn about your mother's bloody potatoes." His voice cracked like a whip, startling Shaun into silence. "Whoa, sorry, Grandpa." Shaun raised his hands, palms out, stepping back. His grandfather's expression softened, but his eyes remained distant. "I can't keep hiding from every damned April shower." It's May," Shaun muttered, unsure why he bothered. Ignoring him, the old man pulled on his shoes, leaning heavily against the wall. He reached for the door. "Grandpa, wait," Shaun said, grabbing his arm. "We can go for a walk when it stops, I promise." The old man shook him off with surprising strength, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You stay here. Wait for your mother." "I mean it, Shaun. Don't follow me." Shaun hesitated, his heart thudding. "I'm not gonna cry after you or anything, old man," he snapped, trying to mask his worry. His grandfather's face softened into a ghost of a smile. "Good lad," he murmured. "Just an old man with something that needs doing." "Fine, but when you catch a cold and die, I'm telling Mom it's your fault." The old man chuckled, a dry, brittle sound. "You'd be right about that." And with that, he stepped into the storm, pulling the door closed behind him. Shaun stood frozen, the echo of the latch reverberating through the house. The rain thickened, wrapping the town in its chilling embrace, as Shaun wrestled with the unease gnawing at his gut. The night seemed darker now, and he couldn't shake the feeling that his grandfather wasn't coming back. Shaun shook his head, trying to shake off the unease gnawing at the edges of his thoughts. He moved to the window, his fingers trembling slightly as he pulled the blinds. Outside, the rain lashed the streets, a heavy curtain of water distorting the world beyond. His eyes fixed on a distant figure, his grandfather hobbling unsteadily down the road. The old man's steps were small and irregular, as if every movement was a battle. Shaun adjusted his glasses, squinting at the frail form. He thought about grabbing the cane from the hall, but his grandfather's final, stern warning echoed in his mind. "Don't follow me." If the stubborn old man wanted to fall, maybe he'd earned the right. The rain intensified, shifting from a rhythmic patter to a deafening roar. Shaun pressed his face closer to the glass, but the figure ahead seemed to blur and shrink, swallowed by the downpour. He can't be that far, Shaun thought, frowning. But no matter how hard he squinted, his grandfather appeared unnervingly small, as though the rain was washing pieces of him away. Taking off his glasses, Shaun wiped them with the sleeve of his hoodie. He put them back on and peered out again. His frown deepened. The old man's steps had slowed. His arms now dangled limply at his sides, his posture crumpling as though something unseen pressed down on him. Shaun's breath caught when his grandfather's knees buckled, sending him sprawling to the ground. "Grandpa!" Shaun bolted for the door, yanking it open. The cold rain immediately soaked through his clothes, clinging to his skin. His glasses fogged and smeared with water, but he didn't care. He ran, feet pounding through puddles that splashed filthy water up his legs. Every squelch of his waterlogged shoes sent a chill up his spine. Through the blur of rain, the small, crumpled shape of his grandfather came into view. But as Shaun drew closer, dread pooled in his stomach. The figure was shrinking, collapsing in on itself. It wasn't right. It wasn't human. "Grandpa!" He shouted again, his voice cracking as panic tightened his throat. His chest heaved as he stumbled forward, only to stop dead when he reached the spot where his grandfather had fallen. There was no old man, just a heap of sodden clothes. Shaun dropped to his knees in the pooling water. His trembling hands reached out, lifting the plaid shirt his grandfather had been wearing. It felt wrong, too light, too thin. It slipped from his grip like wet tissue, dissolving into a slimy residue that slithered between his fingers. "No, no, no, no." Shaun's voice broke into a sob as he frantically dug through the pile. His hands met nothing but the cold, empty fabric, which quickly melted away into the rain-slicked pavement. He was left clawing at the ground, the storm's fury drowning his cries. A car engine rumbled nearby. Headlights cut through the rain as the vehicle pulled up beside him. The door slammed, and Shaun barely registered the sound of hurried footsteps splashing toward him. "Shaun!" His mother's voice pierced the storm, sharp with panic. She crouched beside him, grabbing his shoulders. "What are you doing out here? Where's Grandpa?" Shaun couldn't answer. His mouth opened, but no words came. He simply collapsed into her arms, clinging to her like a lifeline as the rain continued to pour. Back in the kitchen, Shaun sat at the table, draped in a towel. A steaming mug of tea sat untouched in front of him, his hands wrapped around it for warmth. His mother paced nearby, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, officer," she said, her voice tight. "His name is James Duggal. My father, he just wandered off in the storm. He's in his 70s, and I think he was confused." Shaun stared blankly at the shamrock pattern on his mug, the green and gold blurring together as he crossed his eyes. His mother hung up the phone and sat down across from him, her face pale. "Dad hated the rain," she murmured, more to herself than to Shaun. "Back when I was a kid, if there was even a chance of a storm, he'd pack us up and drive until we outran it. He always said, 'The rain can't catch us,'" she sighed, resting her chin on her hand. "That's why he moved here, you know. Hardly ever rains." Shaun looked up, his voice hollow. "Well, it caught him. Do you have any idea why he hated it?" Shaun asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His mother tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, her eyes distant. "I think," she began slowly, "it reminded him of Ireland, rained half the year in Cork." "Sue Cork," Shaun said, mimicking his grandfather's gruff accent. He picked up his mug, tracing his thumb over the goofy, grinning shamrock printed on the side. His frown deepened. Why did he leave, though? Really leave? His mother gave a small, wistful smile. "Ah, the grand mystery of your grandfather's departure. Probably running from the mob or something," she said with a chuckle. "You remember all those stories he used to tell about him and his brothers pulling cons when they were your age?" Shaun nodded, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, like when they'd pin rabbit skins and sell them as seal pelts. Exactly, his mother said, her eyes lighting up. She raised a finger, her tone turning playful. But the real trick was to get out of town before it rained, Shaun finished, sitting up straighter as the words left his mouth. The smile slipped from his face, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. His mind raced. Could this have something to do with what happened? Was his grandfather trying to warn him, to clue him in on something all these years? Shaun had always thought the rain washed away their lies, revealing the trick for what it was. But maybe there was something else. Something deeper. His mother's warm hand covered his own, pulling him from his thoughts. "You don't need to worry," she said softly, her voice steady but kind. "Grandpa just got confused, that's all. The police will find him soon, and this will just be another story to tell." "Right," Shaun murmured, though the knot in his stomach tightened. The urge to tell her what he'd really seen burned at the back of his throat like bile, but he forced it down with a sip of lukewarm tea. "Do you want me to make you something to eat?" she asked, breaking the silence. Shaun shook his head. "No thanks. I'm gonna head to bed." He stood from the table, the chair scraping softly against the linoleum. "Let me know if you need anything." "Good night, sweetheart." "Night, Mom." As Shaun made his way through the dim house, he stopped at the living room window. He pulled the blinds back and peered out into the storm. The wind howled, driving sheets of rain that battered against the houses and tore at the trees, snapping their branches like brittle bones. Water gushed through the streets, turning them into dark rivers. The world beyond the glass was chaos, destruction, but there was something almost cleansing about it. The storm swept through the town like a vengeful force, but it was also purging, baptizing. Shaun had the eerie sense that tomorrow's sunlight would be impossibly bright. The air sharper, cleaner than it had any right to be. It would shine on a town scrubbed of its sins. He shivered, gripping the edge of the windowsill. Why had his grandfather feared the rain so much? Why had he fled from it for all those years? Shaun didn't know, and maybe he didn't want to. What mattered now was that, in the end, his grandfather had faced it. A strange calm settled over him as he let the blinds fall back into place. That night, Shaun dreamed of Seal's sleek, glistening bodies sliding effortlessly into the black, endless depths of the ocean. They vanished one by one, swallowed by the water, leaving no trace behind.